Me and my husband owned a cattle ranch here, and I can confirm that all of the cattle ranchers here overwhelmingly voted for Trump. We support him. We voted for him. Something like 70% of our entire workforce is undocumented immigrants, and they straight up are not showing up for work anymore. They have all either fled the country, fled the state. They don't want to get raided while at work, so they have just moved on to work somewhere else. And straight up, we are going to go bankrupt now. We are going to go bankrupt. And, yeah, we voted. We knew that the immigrants would get deported and he was coming after immigrants, yet we still voted for it. Overwhelmingly voted for our own demise. I was talking to my husband last night, and I have to admit that it seems a bit foolish now when you think about it like that we voted for something that is now putting us directly out of business.
In this latest edition of Fuck Around and Find Out, Nebraska, the state of Nebraska, going bankrupt. Nebraska farmers going bankrupt because of Trump's tariffs. They all love to vote for Trump out in Nebraska. Not all, but big majority of them. And look at now. Look what's happening to Nebraska. Going broke because of Trump. Never learn. Some people never learn. The one thing they never learn is that it is immigrants that make America great. Not Trump. He makes America shit. Immigrants.
Yo, this is exactly what happens when people vote without thinking about the consequences. Look at Nebraska farmers are going bankrupt, losing everything, and guess what? The majority of those farmers voted for Trump, knowing full well what his policies were gonna do. Tariffs, trade war, Project 2025, all of this hits them first. And now they're realizing the hard way that voting against their own interest comes with a price. Today we are breaking down how Trump's policies literally crushed the backbone of America's farming communities and why so many of these voters just keep repeating the same mistakes over and over the years. We have got reactions, roast, and harsh truth coming up. By the end of this, it will be crystal clear this pain is on them. If you like seeing these reactions and breaking down the chaos, hit the like button, subscribe, and share the video so no one misses it. Let's go into the video.
So no, we don't give a fuck about Nebraska going bankrupt in 6 months. Trump told you what he's gonna do before you voted for him. And y'all voted for him. All y'all farmers in Nebraska voted for him because y'all admitted that y'all voted for him. So now in 6 months, all of y'all will be bankrupt. Go bankrupt. Maybe the rest of the red states will actually see what type of person he is, because he didn't give a fuck about you before. He damn sure don't give a fuck about you now. And that's y'all mistake. Learn from it.
It's Joe from Georgia. So we're getting ready for the first domino to fall, and we know what happens after the first one falls. Well, the state of Nebraska, the governor, Jim Pillen, has asked the federal government for help because they're not going to be able to pay their bills this year. And here's the problem in Nebraska. They had over a $2 billion contract with the Chinese government to export soybeans to China. Well, out of that $2 billion, they've canceled all the contracts. So out of that $2 billion, $350 million was state revenue taxes. They're not getting any of that. And the governor also goes on to say that because the migrant farmers weren't able to work in Nebraska this summer, that those people didn't pay their taxes either. And the farmers who already have crops in the ground, folks, they've already spent their money. They're going to need help too, because they're not getting any money from the contracts anymore. So Nebraska is the first state, And when you look at the Midwest, you're probably looking at Kansas, you're looking at Iowa, South Dakota, all of those places that are large exporters of grains to China and depend on migrant farm labor. They're not going to be able to pay their bills either. So here's the first one to fall. But of course, as we do know, a certain person in a certain house in Washington, D.C. at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, they know all about bankruptcy. I'm sure they'll be able to help.
Look at this, man. Some people are straight up saying they don't care about these farmers. And honestly, they kind of have a point. These Nebraska farmers knew what Trump was all about. They were warned, they still went all in. And now the state is breathing cash $500 million gone because of tariffs, loss of migrant labor, and trade wars. That's not just numbers on spreadsheet. That's families losing farms, communities losing livelihood, and the whole state feeling the stench. It's wild how people cheer for someone who retired tells them what they're gonna do, then act surprised when it actually happens. This is why voting blindly or voting for personal bias over reality always comes back to bite. And the craziest part, while the state scrambles to avoid total collapse, these farmers are still trying to hold on like nothing's wrong. Wake up, folks. This is the price you pay for ignorant facts and falling for the promises that never had your back. Let's continue.
So Nebraska voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. They didn't vote for him once. They voted for him time and time and time again. They felt that they were making a wise decision, but it turns out that this was probably the worst decision they could have ever made. The nuts and bolts, the core of their economy, the agriculture industry, is absolutely being annihilated as a result of their vote.
Right now, Nebraska has all sorts of challenges are cropping up for Nebraska farmers. The Nebraska Farmers Union says producers are facing the toughest time in decades.
Their costs are rising, but commodity prices are falling, meaning they can't really turn a profit, and that's hurting the rest of the state's economy. Channel 8's Jake Holman joins us live after talking with a local farmer. Jake, what'd you find out?
Yeah, Rod, Sophia, the GDP numbers for the first quarter of 2025, which is another tool, a measurement to estimate the size of the economy. It does not paint a pretty picture for the state of Nebraska here, and in large part because of the largest industry, which is agriculture. Now, tonight we hear how one farmer is coping with these challenges.
With the interest rates where they are right now, it's putting everybody into a bind.
Bill Landon is one of the many farmers in Nebraska who's in a tight spot financially. According to a report from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, Nebraska's gross domestic product fell more than 6% in the first quarter, tied with Iowa for the largest decrease in the nation. And it's because of losses in agriculture.
Now, you remember Don Bacon, the Republican from Nebraska? He's even saying the quiet part aloud. Nebraska's in trouble, and it owes a lot to the tariff policy and all the bullshit that Donald Trump has enacted on that state. So, Don, my man, don't be surprised when everyone told you, just like your MAGA cohorts in your state, everyone told you that this was going to be the case, but yet you failed to listen. My mother would always say, and I think she was a genius, she would always say, if you lie down with dogs, you will get fleas. Well, Nebraska, you laid down with Donald Trump. You laid down with Donald Trump, knowing what his policies were, knowing his Project 2025 tendencies, and you now have fleas. In reality, this is not about red or blue. This is about business, the business of politics. And I believe that there is a nefarious plan to take family farms. And I'm talking about family farms. And it is based on causing them to go bankrupt, coming in with the hedge funds, and buying at a fire sale price. So Nebraska, you got exactly what you voted for.
So I'm seeing a lot of people being confused about how, Nebraskans and people in agricultural communities can be voting against their own interests. And I have a lot of experience with these people. I'm related to them. And obviously when I talk about them, I don't mean all farmers and I don't mean all the people in these states. But in my experience, the farmers have been living a fairy tale for many generations. They have been told by the government and by our own society, that they're extremely valuable, which they are, but that they are self-made men and that they exist in a vacuum and that we would be lost without them. And most weird, that they don't receive any kind of assistance, that they're self-made, which is a fairy tale. They receive a lot of assistance, but this is the story they've been telling themselves. This is a story that the government has been telling them. And this is the story that they've passed on to their children and their children's children, because they want to glamorize. They want to make what they're doing idyllic. They don't want their kids to leave the farm. They don't want their kids to go to the big city. They want them to stay and they want them to keep the farm. So their kids and their kids and their kids have all been raised with this idea that as farmers, they are heroic. They are, the backbone of America. Even though at this point, the backbone of America, if it's farmers, then it's completely made out of like fabricated steel and been replaced by a neurosurgeon like 3 times. They don't see that. So they don't understand. When you live in a fairy tale your whole life, and when you've been raised in a fairy tale, and when your father was raised in a fairy tale, you don't use critical thinking skills. You don't analyze what you're doing. You just keep going with the fairy tale. And you don't choose a political candidate that forces you to think. You choose the political candidate that encourages you to stay in the fairy tale. So that's how they keep voting for the bad people. That's how they keep voting against their own interests, because they're in a fairy tale. They're so enmeshed in it that they don't want somebody waking them up. They want somebody who's going to keep them asleep. And unfortunately, they're going to have to wake up sometime.
Now it gets even more brutal. Here we are talking about Project 2025, the consequences of policies these farmers already knew were coming, and yet they thought they would somehow escape it. Newsflash, they didn't. And look at why this keeps happening. Some of these folks live in this fairy tale where they believe they are the backbone of the country, untouchable, invisible, and all those stuff. But reality doesn't care about your dreams or your ego. Voting against your own interest, that's how you end up in bankruptcy court, wondering what went wrong. It's not about money, it's about accountability. People tried to warn them, explain the stakes, but they brushed it off, thinking it wouldn't affect them personally. Now they are staring down the consequences, and it's painful to watch because it's totally avoidable. This is the harsh lessons that comes when ideology outweighs logic, and greedy or royalty blinds people to the damage happening right in front of them. Let's continue.
Just a lonely old trucker, and I need a new friend. Anyways, watching these videos, I want to get into some of these videos that I was watching, especially one that really stood out to me. Was a lady from Nebraska that she said her and her husband, I believe she said, were cattle ranchers, but I may be wrong about that. But she had stated that, what the fuck am I saying? That her and her husband are getting ready to go bankrupt. Because of Donald Trump's economic policies, they are not able to keep their ranch, which is a huge win for Donald Trump and especially J.D. Vance. Just more land in Nebraska that the wealthy elites or foreign investors can buy at a discounted price because you just went fucking broke. And look, we tried to tell people, we tried to warn them that this was coming, but they denied reality. They acted like we were the fucking crazy ones, and now their asses are about to be homeless. And I do not feel necessarily any kind of sympathy for that. Yeah, dummy, like pay attention. The wealthy con man that has built his life off of defrauding the working class Americans might do the same to you. Like I don't get it. You know the story about the snake that Donald Trump always tells? Pay attention, fuckers. That was about him. I mean, I don't know what you want from me. But she started talking about all those things. The tariff prices, they can't find any labor, all those fucking things. And as she was saying all the things that led up to this, she goes, God, now that I'm saying it out loud, it really sounds like we voted against our own interests, doesn't it? Yeah, dummy, it does. It sounds like you voted against your own interest. That's exactly what the fuck just happened. And it was cool that, like, she realized it as she was saying it, but I still think she was in somewhat a bit of denial, saying it sounds like we voted against our own interest. But did we really? Yes, you really did. Because it's you and your husband that are going bankrupt now, and you and your husband, it's a you fucking problem at this point. And that is kind of where we're at in America, my friends, as we continue to watch Donald Trump's failed economic policies crash one thing after another. The stock market doesn't really respond right now, but I got a feeling it will at some point, and when it does respond, it's going to respond in a very big way. Either the Supreme Court is going to rule his tariffs unconstitutional and he'll stop, which I fucking doubt, or eventually all this is going to catch up and the stock market is going to tumble one day like it did back when George W. Bush was president and fucking damn near crashed the damn thing. But everything else is reacting in a very negative way to everything that Donald Trump is doing. GM's missing their projected profit for the last quarter. Procter & Gamble is laying off. Ford, I haven't investigated it too much. I've just seen you guys mention it, and I looked it up just briefly, but Ford announcing layoffs. And all of this in the interest, my friends, of bringing manufacturing back to America. You remember that lie that we were told about all that? But the point is, getting ready to wrap it up here. There are a lot of farmers all over the country, and especially Nebraska also, that are losing their asses on Donald Trump's failed economic policy. While most of them voted for it, it's something crazy, like 70-80% of farmers voted for Donald Trump. It is hard to feel sympathy for.
Man, watching all this play out is brutal, but it's exactly what happens when people vote without thinking about the consequences. Nebraska farmers went all in for Trump, thinking other, ignoring warnings, ignoring reality, and now they're paying the price. This isn't just about one state either, it's reason for everyone. Blind loyalty and following a leader without understanding their policies has real, tangible consequences. Families lose farms, communities struggle, and the country feels it in ways most people don't even see until it's too late. And let's be real, this wasn't some accident. Trump was upfront about what he was going to do. He told them, and they voted him anyway. That's why people have no sympathy at all. This is the result of choice, not a chance. But it's bigger than just Nebraska. This is what happens when ideology awaits logic, when fantasy blinds people from reality. It's not pretty, it's not fair, but it's the truth. People have to face the consequences of the actions. Even if it's harshy, they have to face it. So take a look at these reactions, learn from them, and understand the decision halfway. You can't cheer for policies that hurt you, then act surprised when it hits you, right? That's just how life works. If the video opened up your eyes, or you just enjoyed watching the chaos unfold, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with everyone who needs to see this. Trust me, there is plenty more where this comes from, and it's only getting wilder. Stay sharp, pay attention, and a reminder, choices have consequences, sometimes brutal ones. And the farmers, they're feeling it the hardest. Thank you for watching. Appreciate you all, and see you to the next one. I wish you love and peace. Bye-bye. See you to the next video. Bye.